Hi, everybody. This is Maxine Taylor with another edition of my Trumpology report for November 2017. Today was a big day for us because, do you remember a few months back during one of my Trumpology reports, I said, we ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to be happening. Well, it started happening today. October 30th, 2017. This was the day that Mueller served indictments to Paul Manafort and Rick Gates for being complicit during the Trump campaign with Russia. Now, there was a third gentleman, George Papadopoulos, who pled guilty to having made, I want to quote him correctly, false statements. That's meaning lying to FBI agents investigating the Trump-Russia scandal. So it came out today, huge amount of evidence and proof. That will be ongoing, of course. There will be more on that. I was going to look at Paul Manafort's chart. I don't have a birth time for him, number one. Number two, we know what's going to be happening, or we have an idea of what's going to be happening in his life now. The fallout will be on Trump, and so I'm going to focus on Trump. I hope that's okay with you guys. There are going to be many, many more indictments, I'm sure, only because of what I'm looking at. So I don't want to look at all those people. Let's just see when it hits the fan and who else it affects. And it will affect, of course, Trump. So let's look at Trump's chart for November of 2017. The sun, which is the giver of life, wherever it is, it lights up that area of your chart. And it's in his third house of communication. Well, he's a communicator, right? We know he talks. We know he shares ideas. He's off the cuff. And it's more so now, probably because of Mueller's investigations. So lots of communication. But on the 16th, the sun enters his fourth house of home, family, real estate, and emotional security needs. You might say, well, of course, this is moving toward the holiday time. He's going to want to spend time with his family. And that's very true. I'm sure that is true. However, at that point, his family may be involved in the Mueller report. I don't know that that's going to happen. You know, we have the planets give us the potential. We don't know how it's going to shake out. But in part 2 of my report, I'll give you a better idea, okay? Let's talk about the full moon. The full moon on the 4th, just a few days from today, sits in Trump's 9th house of foreigners, long-distance communication and correspondence, even travel. Now, this helps him see the big picture, but it's also, I want to spread my wings and fly. So that's where the full moon is. If that were my chart, I'd get my passport and get on a plane, because whenever you have 9th house activity, you really want to get on a plane. You want to go someplace wonderful. In the case of the president, lots of communication with foreigners, people. I hate to say foreigners, but that's the way it's described in old astrological textbooks that I learned from. But it's long distance communication, correspondence, and transportation. The new moon, I need my glasses for this. The new moon on the 18th sits right smack dab on his 4th house cusp. And this ushers in a time of new beginnings, and this deals with family and real estate. So we don't know what's going to be happening at that time, but we know where it's going to be happening. The next planet I want to talk to you about is Mercury. Now, Mercury is our conscious mind. It's communication, correspondence, transportation. It's what we think about and what we talk about. Well, here it is in his fourth house. It's sitting there right now before before November has even begun. And so there's lots of talking and lots of communicating with his family members. And you might say, well, of course, it's holiday time. Yes, and his family members are involved in his work. Jared Kushner is a key person in his presidency, in his work. And so on the 20th and 21st, Mercury sits on the south node and the moon. The moon is our instinctive need, our subconscious need. Wherever it falls, that's the area where we look for emotional security. The south node is traditionally an area where you don't want to give a whole lot of attention, because if you do, you can be drained. And so communicating with family members, spending time with them, is a very emotional time for him. The 20th and 21st, with Thanksgiving, approaching, you might say that would make sense. So we'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. Okay, let me put this over here and move on to Venus, which is the lesser benefic. It's love, it's beauty, it's whatever it touches, wherever it is. It softens things. It rules money. It rules art. It rules love. Well, it's in his third house of communication, and he's loving talking. He's loving sharing ideas with people right now. And I think what it's helping him do is, I won't say sugarcoat, because that's not what Venus does, but it smooths things over. It sees things lovingly, and it presents them rather in a way that they can be heard. Now, on the 26th, Venus enters his fourth house of home, family, and real estate. He's going to want to spend time at his home. He has several of them. He has several pieces of real estate. And so the family is going to be who he turns to for love, for fulfillment. Now, Mars. Mars is action. It's energy. It's what we throw ourselves into. It's what we fight with and fight for. It's in his second house of money and values and possessions. And on the 19th of November, it sits on his Jupiter. He'll feel it a few days ahead. Jupiter is the great benefic, and in his second house, it brings money. Now, he will be throwing himself into creating more money. In his chart, Jupiter rules his eighth house of other people's money, of taxes. And so you might say, well, is he getting his money from tax relief? Is he getting his money from taxes from other people? It also rules his fifth house of speculation and even gambling. But with Mars on his Jupiter, he is creating more income for himself. I can't tell you how. He's just going to do it. And then, right after Thanksgiving, Mars enters his third house. Now remember, Mars is what we fight with and fight for. When it enters his third house of communication, we ain't heard nothing yet. Because when Mars is in your third house, you shoot from the hip. When you speak, it's with harsh words. Now you might say, well, we've heard that from him before. And that's the truth. And we're going to really hear it from him this time. Okay. Now, what I really want to talk with you about are the August eclipses. And some of you already knew what I was going to be saying, because when we had those eclipses in August, I told everybody that they're at their peak November and December. So I want to go over with you what the eclipses triggered in Trump's chart. First of all, I'm going to keep my notes here because I'm going to give you lots of information. The August 7th eclipse, which, as you recall, was in 15 Aquarius, fell in his 6th house of work, health, service, and employees. Now, I don't know how the people who work for Trump get paid, but the people who work in his environment, in his office, can be considered his employees, even although they work for the people. The truth is, anybody working for the government works for the people. But I feel that we have to include the 6th house as his employees. And this means that any of his employees who are indicted, and employees is in quotes, will fall in this area. So the full moon, the lunar eclipse on August 7th, triggered his house of work, health, and service. It opposed his Pluto, which I haven't written here, but I'm going to give you the whole picture. It opposed his Pluto in the 12th house. Now, Pluto is the planet of control. Pluto is all or nothing. It's total destruction and annihilation, and on that, a new situation can be built. It is also transformation. In Trump's chart, Pluto rules his 4th house of home and family. With Pluto in the 12th, there's a great deal of behind-the-scenes control that we will not necessarily know about. The 12th house deals with our enemies, our hidden enemies. It deals with all kinds of behind-the-scenes activities. And what this eclipse did was, in opposing Pluto, took away some of that hidden control that he has, which I think we're seeing with the indictments that just came down. Now, his Jupiter was beautifully aspected by this eclipse. And so, yes, there's more money for him, absolutely. And it trines his planets in his 10th house so that his public image is still protected. Very interesting. The big eclipse for him was the total solar eclipse on August 21st in 29 degrees of Leo. It sat right on his ascendant and on his Mars. Mars in the 12th house is hidden anger. I don't know if it's so hidden because Mars is very close to his ascendant. Mars is 26 Leo, the ascendant is 29 Leo. It's pretty darn close to his ascendant. So his temper is very much part of him. With Mars on your ascendant, whether in the 12th house or the 1st, you love a fight. You fight for the just sheer joy of fighting. There's anger, suppressed anger. And so with this eclipse triggering his Mars, there's war behind the scenes. The 12th house deals with our hidden enemies. And these are people who we don't even realize are our enemies until they are exposed. With the eclipse on his ascendant, it is a new life for him. And when I first talked about the August eclipses, that's what I said. It's a new life for him, and that could be anything. That could be stepping down. That could be coming into his own more traditionally. An eclipse on your ascendant, your moon, or your sun is a very favorable aspect. So I have no idea how this is going to manifest, except that I do know that his rage is triggered, his self-concept is triggered, and there is the potential for a new start for him. Any one of those or all of them can manifest. So let's look at the United States chart. Remember, this is potential. Some of you say, why am I including all this extraneous information? It's not extraneous. It's explaining how I'm arriving at my conclusions. And because we always have free will, and Trump has free will, we cannot tell what he's going to do. We do know, based on his birth chart, that whatever he does, it's going to be larger than life. It's going to be off the wall. It's going to be unexpected. And that's his nature. He's a showman. And that Mars behind his ascendant reminds me of his reality show, The Apprentice, when he loved to say, "You're fired." And he's been saying that since he's been in office, which tells me that he just lives for a fight, particularly now with the August 21st on his ascendant. I'm thinking that if he uses this on its highest and best level, he can create a whole new life for himself. Now, let's look at the United States chart. Those of you studying astrology, you know I use the 7 Gemini ascendant chart. Why? Because it works, that's why. It works for me. So let's look at the United States chart and we'll have a much clearer picture. Okay, let us start, first of all, with the sun. Now, in the United States chart, the sun is in the 6th house of work, health, and service, but it's more than that. It deals with public health. And I can't help but be thinking of Puerto Rico, because the health situation there has been abominable with the hurricanes and the lack of power and the lack of water and the lack of food and the lack of help. So that would make a lot of sense. However, with the sun moving through that 6th house, help is on the way. The 6th house in a mundane chart, in a country's chart, deals with the military, with jobs, pets, food, police, fire department. You know, with the weather changes going on in the United States, we are so grateful to our police and fire and health departments for coming in and being there to help out. Just amazing. Okay, now on the 28th of the month, the sun moves into the 7th house. Now, right now we're dealing with the workers, with people, the jobs that people have, the type of work they do, and the health of our country. Now, on the 28th, the sun enters the 7th house. And the 7th house is very interesting in a mundane chart. It deals with international affairs, with the public, with what the public wants, with contracts. It deals with war, with lawsuits, with our open enemies. Okay, we know who those are. With politics and marriage and divorce and the lower courts. Now, you want to keep in mind that the sun sheds a light on that. It opens us up to this. So, believe it or not, with the sun in these two areas, there can be light that is given and improvements made. Now, in addition, the full moon on the 4th is in the 12th house of our United States chart, in a mundane chart. Very, very interesting. The 12th house deals with spies, with bribery, with our hidden enemies. Remember, these are people who we might even think are friends. That's why we're dealing with the 12th house, deals with spies, with secret societies, with welfare, prison, jail, hospitals, crime and criminals, charitable institutions, and anything behind the scenes. And so this is stirring up all kinds of secrets and behind the scenes activities. The new moon on the 18th reinforces everything I said about the sun in the 6th house. And this is when things will move forward, the energy will move forward, and jobs, health, workers, pets, all of that will improve. Now let's look at Mercury. Mercury is our conscious mind. It's what we think about and talk about. So there's lots of talk going on about work, health, service, the military, the police, food, everything that I've already outlined. And on the 10th, Mercury enters our 7th house, and there's a lot of communication about our, not only about, but with our open enemies, the people who we know are essentially not on our team, okay? We may be talking about war, we may be talking about lawsuits, lawyers, politics, international affairs, and the lower courts. So you can see that things are moving forward in those areas. Okay. Let's talk about Venus. Venus, the lesser benefic. On the 9th, it sits on our vertex in that 6th house. The vertex is our karmic role in life. And in a mundane chart, this means that our role as, if this were a person's chart, this would be a house of service. The person, if this were a person, this is the person who wants to serve, who wants to give, who wants to help those less fortunate. And Venus brings love and light to our role as a loving, caring, serving nation. Quite beautiful. And then let's look at Mars. Mars is what we fight with and fight for. So Mars is sitting in our 5th house. Now the 5th house in a mundane chart is children, it's fun, it's sports, it's gambling, it's congressional and public hearings, and stadiums, things happening at stadiums. You know, when large crowds gather, stadiums need extra security. On the 14th, Mars, fighting with, sits on Saturn. Wherever Saturn is, we take ourselves very seriously. This is our country, and we take it very serious. We take all our children seriously. We take our fun seriously too. In the United States chart, Saturn rules the 8th house of taxes, of death. It rules the treasurer, it rules our debts, taxes, losses, and secrets. It also rules the 9th house. And in a mundane chart, the 9th house rules the upper courts, foreign travel, higher education. It rules the Supreme Court. It rules world trade, universities. And so this can be something that can be very helpful when it comes to higher education, because Saturn is in our 5th house of education and children. Education is involved, believe it or not, with the 5th house because of children. And in addition, I saved the best for last. Saturn rules the 10th house. The 10th house rules the president, the party in power, our public image. And so with Mars there, I really feel like there can be a certain amount of aggravation, fighting about all of those areas. In the area of sports, of course, we expect fighting. I mean, sports like football are a socially acceptable place to wage war. It's a socially acceptable war. And so this can be a great outlet for us. Now, on the 27th of the month, Mars moves into the 6th house. And so there can be arguing and fighting over jobs, over health, over in the military, the police, everything that I've talked about before about the 6th house. So we've got strong 6th house activity coming along in the United States. And now we're going to talk about the eclipses, the August eclipses. I want to get my sheet here because I want to describe everything in detail. On August 7th, we had an eclipse that's right up here on the midheaven, which is our public image. The 10th house, the cusp of the 10th house, is called the midheaven. The 10th house rules the president, our public image in the world, and the party in power. Now, this eclipse also sat on our moon in Aquarius. But for those of you who don't know this, our moon is in 18 Aquarius. And so this house deals with our leaders and the reputation of our leaders. The moon deals with change. I don't know what change. I don't know what is going to happen because the moon, of course, rules people. It rules the public, is what it does. It rules our emotions. And so there can be a change in our public image tied in with the president. I've said this before, and I'm saying it again now. Then the total solar eclipse on August 21st fell in our fourth house. Now, the fourth house in a mundane chart deals with real estate. It deals with the party out of power. So in this case, it's the Democrats, right? Deals with domestic affairs, with weather, with earth changes. Our weather has been horrific. With land, with farmers, with crops, and with seniors. And so many of the topics that we're talking about involve seniors, such as health care, such as taxes. So these eclipses that we had in August are at their peak, November and December. There's even more coming next month as the planets move forward in their arc around the zodiac. So I hope you're going to join me next month as well when we take a look at what is going on in the United States and what is going on with Trump. And let me again offer, if you do not have a copy of your own birth chart and would like one, this is not the interpretation, it's a printout of the actual chart. Here's what you'll get. This is what it looks like. If you would like that, go to my website, MaxineTaylor.com. And you can send me a note. You can fill out a form if you like. Send me your birth data, the month, day, and year when you were born, the city and state, if you're here in the States, and the exact time you were born. And I will send you an actual copy of your birth chart at no charge. Then, some of you already know this, on my YouTube channel, if you scroll down the page, there are some TV shows I did called Astrology 101. If you look at those shows, I teach you how to interpret your birth chart. If you already know how to interpret it, but you don't know how to forecast it, look at my Astrology 201 shows. And they too, all those shows, free of charge. So, I hope this has been helpful for you. There is more to come. Keep in mind that with astrology, we always have our free will. So it is up to the people involved to determine the outcome. However, the stars don't lie. And what I said, I will stand by. I thank you all for being such wonderful visitors to my site. So many of you have wonderful comments. Thank you so much. And so until we meet again, this is Maxine Taylor saying, may the stars shine brightly on you and yours.